Mass, imposition of the pallium, and bestowal of the fisherman's ring, for the beginning of the Petrine ministry, of the Bishop of Rome, homily of Pope Francis, St. Peter's Square, Tuesday, March 19th, 2013. Solemnity of St. Joseph. Dear brothers and sisters, I thank the Lord that I can celebrate this holy Mass for the inauguration of my Petrine ministry on the Solemnity of St. Joseph, the spouse of the Virgin Mary and the patron of the Universal Church. It is a significant coincidence, and it is also the name day of my venerable predecessor. We are close to him with our prayers, full of affection and gratitude. I offer a warm greeting to my brother cardinals and bishops, the priests, deacons, men and women religious, and all the lay faithful. I thank the representatives of the other churches and ecclesial communities, as well as the representatives of the Jewish community and the other religious communities for their presence. My cordial greetings go to the heads of state and government, the members of the official delegations from many countries throughout the world, and the diplomatic corps. In the gospel we heard that Joseph did as the angel of the Lord commanded him and took Mary as his wife. These words already point to the mission which God entrusted Joseph. He is to be the custos, the protector of whom? Of Mary and Jesus. But this protection is then extended to the church, as Blessed John Paul II pointed out. Just as St. Joseph took loving care of Mary and gladly dedicated himself to Jesus Christ's upbringing, he likewise watches over and protects Christ's mystical body, the church, of which the Virgin Mary is the exemplar and model. How does Joseph exercise his role as protector? Discreetly, humbly and silently, but with an unfailing presence and utter fidelity, even when he finds it hard to understand. From the time of his betrothal to Mary until the finding of the 12-year-old Jesus in the Temple of Jerusalem, he is there at every moment with loving care. As the spouse of Mary, he is at her side in good times and bad, on the journey to Bethlehem for the census, and in the anxious and joyful hours when she gave birth, amid the drama of the flight into Egypt and during the frantic search for their child in the temple, and later in the day-to-day life of the home of Nazareth, in the workshop where he taught his trade to Jesus. How does Joseph respond to his calling to be the protector of Mary, Jesus, and the church? By being constantly attentive to God, open to the signs of God's presence, and receptive to God's plans, and not simply to his own. This is what God asked of David, as we heard in the first reading. God does not want a house built by men, but faithfulness to his word, to his plan. It is God himself who builds a house, but from living stones sealed by his Spirit. Joseph is a protector because he is able to hear God's voice and be guided by his will. And for this reason, he is all the more sensitive to persons entrusted to his safekeeping. He can look at things realistically. He is in touch with his surroundings. He can make truly wise decisions. In him, dear friends, we learn how to respond to God's call readily and willingly, but we also see the core of the Christian vocation, which is Christ. Let us protect Christ in our lives so that we can protect others, so that we can protect creation. The vocation of being a protector, however, is not just something involving us Christians alone. It also has a prior dimension, which is simply human, involving everyone. It means protecting all creation, the beauty of the created world, as the book of Genesis tells us, and as St. Francis of Assisi showed us. It means respecting each of God's creatures and respecting the environment in which we live. It means protecting people, showing loving concern for each and every person, especially children, the elderly, those in need, who are often the last we think about. It means caring for one another in our families. Husbands and wives first protect one another, and then, as parents, they care for their children, and children themselves, in time, protect their parents. It means building sincere friendships in which we protect one another in trust, respect, and goodness. In the end, everything has been entrusted to our protection, and all of us are responsible for it. Be protectors of God's gifts. Whenever human beings fail to live up to this responsibility, whenever we fail to care for creation and for our brothers and sisters, the way is open to destruction and hearts are hardened. Tragically, in every period of history, there are Herods who plot death, wreak havoc, and mar the countenance of men and women. Please, I would like to ask all those who have positions of responsibility in economic, political, and social life, and all men and women of goodwill, let us be protectors of creation, protectors of God's plan inscribed in nature, protectors of one another and of the environment. Let us not allow omens of destruction and death to accompany the advance of this world, but to be protectors, we also have to keep watch over ourselves. Let us not forget that hatred, envy, and pride defile our lives. Being protectors, then, also means keeping watch over our emotions, over our hearts, because they're the seat of good and evil intentions, intentions that build up and tear down. We must not be afraid of goodness or even tenderness. Here I would add one more thing. Caring, protecting, demands goodness. It calls for a certain tenderness. In the Gospels, Saint Joseph appears as a strong and courageous man, a working man, yet in his heart we see great tenderness, which is not the virtue of the weak, but rather a sign of strength of spirit and a capacity for concern, for compassion, for genuine openness to others, for love. We must not be afraid of goodness, of tenderness. Today, together with the feast of Saint Joseph, we are celebrating the beginning of the ministry of the new Bishop of Rome, the successor of Peter, which also involves a certain power. Certainly, Jesus Christ conferred power upon Peter, but what sort of power was it? Jesus' 3 questions to Peter about love are followed by 3 commands. Feed my lambs, feed my sheep. Let us never forget that authentic power is service, and that the Pope, too, when exercising power, must enter ever more fully into that service which has its radiant culmination on the cross. He must be inspired by the lowly, concrete, and faithful service which marked St. Joseph, and like him, he must open his arms to protect all of God's people and embrace with tender affection the whole humanity, especially the poorest, the weakest, the least important, those whom Matthew lists in the final judgment on love. The hungry, the thirsty, the stranger, the naked, the sick, and those in prison. Only those who serve with love are able to protect,